Welcome to my podcast. Today I'll be talking about players on the rise in fantasy hockey as well as players to pick up in fantasy football and fantasy basketball. Players on the rise in fantasy hockey. Center Matt Barzal. Matt Barzal has adjusted to playing at the NHL level and is starting to show flashes of being a star player. He has 3 goals, 9 points, and 4 power play points in the last 2 weeks. Left winger William Karlsson. William Karlsson was added in 20% of Yahoo fantasy leagues. He has 7 goals, 10 points, along with 31 face-off wins in the last 2 weeks. Right winger Mikko Rantanen. Mikko Rantanen has played great as of late. He has 2 goals, 7 points, and 3 power play points in the last 2 weeks. Defenseman Nick Leddy. Nick Leddy has been red hot as of late. In the last 2 weeks, he has 3 goals, 8 points, and 2 power play points. Defenseman D-Mattias Ekholm. D-Mattias Ekholm has been added in 24% of Yahoo fantasy leagues. In the last 2 weeks, he has 4 goals, 6 points, and 3 power play points, and is a +5. Goalie Malcolm Subban. Malcolm Subban has returned from injury and is slated to be the #1 goalie for the Las Vegas Golden Knights. In next week's podcast, I'll be talking about trades in fantasy hockey. Fantasy football waiver wire, players to pick up for week 13. Quarterback Blake Bortles. Blake Bortles had 22.60 fantasy points in week 12 and has a good matchup in week 13 against the Indianapolis Colts. Running back Isiah Crowell. If Isiah Crowell is available for any reason in your league, pick him up immediately. Running back Jamaal Williams. Jamaal Williams put up 17.10 fantasy points in week 12. He will retain a sizable share of backfield touches until Ty Montgomery returns. Wide receiver Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon is expected to play in week 13. With how thin the Browns receiving core is, it shouldn't take long for him to become a vital part of the Browns offense. Wide receiver Josh Doctson. Josh Doctson has become a favorite red zone target for Kirk Cousins. He's worth owning in deep leagues. Defense, Los Angeles Chargers defense. Los Angeles Chargers defense put up 19 fantasy points in week 12 and have a good matchup against a bad Cleveland Browns team. Kicker, Patrick Murray. Patrick Murray has now scored more than 8 fantasy points in 3 consecutive weeks. Next week, I'll be talking about breakout players in fantasy football. Players to pick up in fantasy basketball. Point guard, TJ McConnell. TJ McConnell averaged 12 points, 8.3 assists, and 1.7 steals on 60% shooting last week. Pick him up if you need assists and steals. Shooting guard Wesley Johnson. Wesley Johnson averaged 15 points, 3.7 3-pointers made on 65% shooting last week. He's worth owning in deep leagues with Danilo Gallinari out. Small forward Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson averaged 13 points, 5.3 rebounds, 5.7 assists, and 2.0 steals on 58% shooting last week. He is a stat sheet stuffer. Power forward Kenneth Faried. With Paul Millsap injured, Faried is going to play a much larger role on the Nuggets, so you may want to pick him up in deep leagues. Center, C-Jerrett Allen. C-Jerrett Allen is the most added center in fantasy because he really has no competition with the Nets at that position. Next, I'll be doing another fantasy basketball waiver wire. Next week's podcast, I'll be talking about trades in fantasy hockey, breakout players in fantasy football, and players to pick up in fantasy basketball.